Death was once entertainment. But who entertained death itself? The Colosseum still stands, silent, ancient, majestic. Its broken arches and scarred stones whisper a language long forgotten. Tourists wander beneath its shadow, snapping photos, unaware that every grain of dust carries a story written in blood. 2,000 years ago, this was no ruin. It was a heartbeat, a living, breathing monster built from the bones of empires. Here, death was not an ending. It was a performance. 50,000 Romans once filled these stands, the air thick with heat, wine, and the metallic scent of blood. Trumpets blared, drums thundered, and the crowd roared as the first gladiator stepped into the light. Beneath him, the sand was already stained red from yesterday's show. He raised his sword, saluted the emperor, and shouted the sacred words that echoed through centuries, Moritura te salutant, those who are about to die salute you. The arena was Rome's beating heart, and every heartbeat demanded sacrifice. The Romans did not invent cruelty, but they perfected it, turning violence into art and death into spectacle. In the height of its power, the empire stretched across 3 continents. It ruled millions, but power alone could not hold an empire together. The people needed stories, stories of strength, courage, and dominance. And so, the gladiatorial games were born, not just to entertain, but to remind every Roman who ruled life and death. Each strike of the sword was a ritual of order. Each death in the sand was a message. The emperor was divine, the empire eternal, and the people, they were witnesses to that divine theater. When the crowd screamed, they weren't cheering for death itself. They were cheering for the illusion that death could be controlled. That life, in the end, could mean something glorious. But who were the men who faced that death? Gladiators. The word itself carries weight, half hero, half prisoner. They came from every corner of the known world. Some were slaves, captured in wars, dragged from their homes in chains. Gauls, Thracians, Dacians, men who once fought for their freedom, now forced to fight for amusement. Others were criminals, condemned to die by the sword. And yet, there were also those who chose it. Free men, desperate or hungry for fame, who signed away their freedom for a contract of blood. They were called auctorati, volunteers who sold their lives for glory, gold, or perhaps redemption. Inside the training schools, known as ludi, they were remade. Broken down, built back up. Beaten, trained, tested. The most famous of these schools was the Ludus Magnus, standing beside the Colosseum itself, a labyrinth of cells, sand pits, and echoing corridors filled with the clash of wooden swords. The men trained like beasts. Every day was pain. Every meal, a reminder that tomorrow might be their last. Their trainers, often retired gladiators themselves, taught them not only to fight, but to perform. To die with style. To bleed with grace. Because in Rome, even death had to be beautiful. Each battle in the arena was a story, a carefully crafted myth of blood and symbolism. The crowd did not see mere combat, they saw characters, roles, archetypes. There was the Mamillo, heavy and towering, his helmet crested like a fish, symbol of Roman strength and discipline. He moved slow, powerful, unstoppable. The Thracian, fast and cunning, wielding a curved blade that flashed like lightning. The Retiarius, almost naked, armed only with a net and trident, mocking the god of the sea himself. Every duel was a performance of contrast, strength against speed, armor against freedom, empire against rebellion. When a fighter fell, the crowd held its breath. The emperor would raise his hand, and with a single gesture, decide the fate of a man. The thumb turned upward or downward was not always literal. Historians still debate it. But what mattered was not the direction, it was the ritual. The emperor was no longer man, he was God. Life or death balanced on his whim. And in that instant, the arena became a cathedral of mortality. To the people of Rome, gladiators were both despised and adored. They were slaves, yet heroes. Property, yet idols. The same citizens who spat at them on the streets would weep at their deaths in the arena. Women wrote their names on walls, scratched love notes into stone. Children played pretend, swinging wooden swords, shouting their favorite gladiator's name. A successful fighter could become rich, or even win freedom. The wooden sword of release, called the rudus, was a sacred prize. Few ever lived long enough to earn it. Most died young, their bones buried beneath the sands they once conquered. Yet for many, that brief moment under the sun was worth everything. In a world where lives meant nothing, they became gods for a heartbeat. They were seen, remembered, immortalized in cheers. Perhaps, for them, that was enough. Why did people watch? Why did tens of thousands cheer as men tore each other apart? The answer lies deeper than cruelty. The games were a mirror, a reflection of Rome itself, powerful, disciplined, unflinching. Every Roman who watched saw more than blood. They saw courage, fear, and the eternal struggle between life and death. In that sand, the people confronted their own mortality. Watching a man die bravely was not just entertainment, it was a spiritual act, a reassurance that courage could defy fate, that death could be conquered through honor. It was also propaganda. The empire needed its people to believe in order, to accept hierarchy. The games reminded them of their place. The emperor above all, the people below, the gladiators beneath them both, and yet, somehow, beyond them all. History remembers only a few names, but their stories became legend. Spiculus, the favorite of Emperor Nero, whose skill with the sword made him rich and adored, until Nero's madness turned on him, and Spiculus fell with the empire he had entertained. Flamma, the Syrian, who was offered freedom 4 times, and refused it each time. He chose the arena over peace, glory over safety. Better to die a hero, he once said, than live forgotten. And Spartacus, the name that still echoes louder than all others. A slave who became a soldier, then a rebel, then a symbol of defiance itself. He turned his sword not against other men in the arena, but against Rome itself. His rebellion was crushed, his body broken, but his spirit survived. Each of these men was more than a fighter. They were stories carved into the bones of history, symbols of everything Rome tried to control, and everything it could never truly own. Behind every cheer, there was silence. Behind every roar, there was fear. Before the gate opened, before the sunlight hit their eyes, the gladiators waited in darkness. They prayed to Mars, to Fortuna, to anyone who might hear them. They could smell the blood before they saw it. They could feel the vibration of the crowd above, a living sea demanding their souls. And then, the gate creaked open. Light blinded them. For a moment, there was no sound, only the heartbeat. Then, the roar. 50,000 voices. 50,000 gods demanding sacrifice. In that instant, the gladiator became infinite. His every movement was art, his every breath a gamble. Time slowed. The sun flashed on steel. The world became sand, sweat, and destiny. And when he fell, if he fell, the earth drank his blood like wine. The crowd cheered. The empire continued. And somewhere, beneath the stands, another man waited for his turn to die. The philosopher Seneca once asked, "What can be more glorious than to face death with a smile?" He hated the games, called them cruel, senseless. Yet even he could not deny the power of a man who looked death in the eye and did not flinch. That was the paradox of Rome: beauty born from brutality, order from chaos, life from death. The gladiator was its perfect symbol, both victim and hero, both shame and pride. He was Rome itself, magnificent, violent, unstoppable, doomed. As centuries passed, the sands grew quieter. The blood dried. New faiths rose. Christianity spread through the empire, preaching mercy where once there had been spectacle. The people began to change. In the year 404, the last gladiatorial fight was held. A monk named Telemachus entered the arena, throwing himself between 2 fighters, shouting for peace. The crowd stoned him to death. But his sacrifice ended an age. The emperor banned the games forever. The Colosseum remained, but now it stood silent. Its stones, once stained with blood, became relics of a forgotten madness. The empire fell soon after, but the legend, the image of the gladiator, never died. Today, we still speak of them. In movies, in books, in dreams. Because something about them still lives within us. The hunger to fight, to rise above fate, to be remembered. Every athlete, every soldier, every soul who struggles against impossible odds, carries the same spark, the same madness. We no longer fight with swords, but the arena never truly vanished. It just changed shape, into stadiums, into screens, into the endless need to prove ourselves. The Colosseum still stands, not just in Rome, but in every human heart. Because perhaps, in our own way, we are all gladiators, fighting invisible battles, bleeding for meaning, craving to be seen, if only for one brief, shining moment. Death was entertainment once, but those who entertained death became eternal. The gates of the Ludus Magnus were heavy, carved from dark oak and iron. Behind them lay a world the public would never see. Outside, Rome celebrated its heroes, drank their wine, and sang their songs. Inside, men trained, bled, and dreamed of the arena. The school was a place of transformation, where boys became warriors and warriors became legends. Every morning, the sun rose over the Colosseum, casting long shadows into the training yards. The scent of sweat, oil, and sand filled the air, mingled with the faint tang of blood. Here, every movement had a purpose, every fall a lesson. Men ran, jumped, struck wooden dummies, sparred with partners, always testing the limits of their bodies, always measuring themselves against death. The trainers were merciless. Once warriors themselves, they knew that a single mistake in the arena meant pain or death. Discipline was drilled into the bones of every student. Early mornings began with exercises that tore at muscles before they were even awake. By midday, the clang of wooden swords striking shields echoed across the courtyards. Even meals were a test, bread and thin soup, enough to fuel practice, but never enough to satiate. Hunger was a teacher, and patience was a weapon. Yet for all the brutality, there was method in the madness. Gladiators were not born, they were sculpted. Each type was trained differently. The Murmillo, towering and armored, learned endurance and power. The Thracian, swift and cunning, practiced evasive maneuvers and rapid strikes. The Retiarius, almost naked and armed with net and trident, honed timing and precision. Every skill, every tactic, every lesson prepared them for a single moment of truth, the arena. The bond between gladiators was strange. They were rivals, competitors, enemies, yet they became brothers in arms. In whispered conversations beneath stone arches, they shared fears and hopes. They joked, argued, sometimes fought each other outside of training. In those moments, laughter was a rebellion against despair. They clung to these fleeting connections because they knew that tomorrow, one of them might not survive the sand. Fear was a constant companion. Each new recruit trembled when first brought before the lanista, the master of the school. Some cried. Others went silent, eyes hollow, trying to memorize the movements that would keep them alive. There was no room for hesitation. Every misstep could be fatal. And yet, courage was taught, not given. Stories circulated among the trainees, legends of men who had survived the impossible. Spiculus, Flamma, Spartacus, names that inspired both awe and dread. They were reminders that glory was possible, but fleeting. Every student carried these tales like armor, a shield against doubt, a spark against fear. The first matches were terrifying. Small duels within the training yard, observed by the lanista and senior fighters. The students faced each other with wooden swords, shields, and nerves stretched thin. Some fell immediately, their bodies bruised and ego shattered. Others rose, striking with precision, earning respect and survival. These early battles were lessons in more than technique. They taught resilience, discipline, and the art of reading a man's intent. In the quiet moments, some gladiators contemplated the fate awaiting them beyond the walls. Freedom was a distant dream. Few would see it. Most would die young, their names forgotten, their blood absorbed by the sand. Yet even in that shadow of inevitability, they trained and they fought. Because the arena offered something money could not buy, a chance to be remembered. A chance to leave a mark on the empire, to rise above mortality, even if only for a heartbeat. The rituals of training were elaborate. Warm-ups were grueling, filled with runs, stretches, and calisthenics that tested endurance. Sparring followed, choreographed to sharpen instincts. Trainers shouted corrections, sometimes striking students themselves to force perfection. Mistakes were punished harshly. Every bruise, every cut, every drop of blood was a lesson. A whisper from the universe that survival was not a right, but a prize. Meals were brief and austere, eaten quickly between drills. Conversations were rare, but when they happened, they were sacred. Discussions of technique, of past matches, of dreams beyond the arena, these were moments of humanity amidst the relentless grind. And at night, the men slept on straw mats, muscles aching, hearts racing, minds haunted by visions of the crowd, the gates, the roaring sound that awaited them in the Colosseum. Friendships were forged in fire and shadow. Gladiators shared more than space. They shared secrets, fears, and fleeting hopes. They learned to trust each other, to anticipate moves, to protect and challenge one another. Rivalries existed, but so did loyalty. In a place where betrayal could be deadly, Bonds were sacred. Those bonds were often the only thing that kept a man sane when the outside world demanded his blood. The training was relentless, but there was also strategy. Each man studied the art of combat as if it were a sacred scripture. Techniques were memorized, movements repeated endlessly until instinct became muscle. Timing, reading opponents, controlling space, these were the true lessons of the Ludi. Survival depended not just on strength, but on cunning, on anticipation, on understanding both the enemy and oneself. The first time a young gladiator entered the arena, he faced a storm of sound and expectation. The sand beneath his feet seemed alien, every cheer a thunderclap in his ears. The crowd's eyes were not gentle. They demanded perfection. They demanded entertainment. And they demanded courage. Many trembled, faltered, even froze. Some never recovered. But those who survived the first taste of the arena learned something essential. Fear could be mastered. Pain could be endured. Death could be faced without losing oneself. In the quiet hours before dawn, the men reflected on their existence. Some prayed. Some cursed. Some simply stared at the walls, wondering if tomorrow would bring another duel, another fight, or their end. Yet, in these moments, they understood the truth of their lives. The arena was not just a place to die. It was a place to become something more. A place where ordinary men could achieve the extraordinary. Every bruise, every scar, every lesson learned in the Ludus Magnus was preparation for a single purpose, the arena. And when the day finally came, when the gate opened and the sun struck the sand, all training, all fear, all camaraderie, all pain, culminated in one heartbeat of destiny. The school was a crucible. It burned away weakness and doubt, leaving only what was essential. A gladiator emerged from it forged, sharpened, and ready to face not just the opponent across from him, but the eyes of thousands, the gaze of the emperor, and the inevitability of death itself. For those who endured, the arena was not a cage. It was a stage. And on that stage, they could write their own legends. The lessons of the Ludus Magnus were clear. Strength without skill is nothing, courage without discipline is futile, and survival is reserved for those who understand both themselves and the world they inhabit. Every man who trained in the school knew it. Every strike, every sweat-drenched hour, every whispered word of advice or insult carried a single truth. The arena would not forgive weakness. It would not wait. And it would remember every failure, every hesitation, every mistake. But for those who mastered the art of blood and sand, the arena offered a different kind of eternity. Not the endless silence of death, but the fleeting roar of the crowd, the taste of glory, the chance to be remembered. Because in the end, the Ludus Magnus was not just a school. It was the birthplace of legend. It was where ordinary men became immortal, where fear was transformed into power, and where the first steps toward eternity were taken in sweat and shadow. And when they finally walked out onto the sands of the Colosseum, every lesson, every scar, every heartbeat of fear and hope combined into one singular purpose: to survive, to fight, and to leave their mark on the empire, for a moment, a lifetime, or eternity. The gates of the Colosseum creaked open, and the sunlight struck the sand like molten gold. For the men inside, it was not merely a passage, it was a threshold between life and legend. Every footstep on the ramp leading to the arena echoed like a heartbeat, each one heavier than the last. Beyond the gates, 50,000 eyes waited, impatient, hungry, demanding a performance that only blood could satisfy. The young gladiator's chest tightened with each step. His hands gripped the hilt of the sword, knuckles white. Sweat slicked his skin, but the heat of the sun and the roar of the crowd made him forget even basic instinct. Time slowed. He could hear the murmurs, the cries, the collective breath of a civilization enthralled by the spectacle of death. The sand beneath his feet was deceptively soft. Every step sank slightly, reminding him that the arena would not forgive mistakes. One slip, one misjudged movement, and he could be torn apart, not just by the opponent, but by fate itself. The first opponent emerged from the opposite gate, helmet glinting, shield raised, muscles tense like coiled snakes. The murmur of the crowd became a roar, drowning out everything else. This was the first real test, the moment all training had led to. Here, there were no teachers, no mentors, only the raw reality of combat. The arena did not care about courage. It cared about survival. They circled each other warily, eyes sharp, breaths measured. The young gladiator remembered the hours in the Ludus Magnus, the relentless drills, the whispered advice of seasoned fighters. Read the opponent. Control the space. Timing is everything. Every movement was rehearsed yet spontaneous. instinct and skill entwined. Then, the first clash. Steel rang against steel, a metallic scream that cut through the roar of the crowd. Pain flared immediately, a searing reminder that training was only preparation. Reality was sharper, faster, and more unforgiving. Every strike required calculation. Every parry demanded precision. Each second stretched into eternity. The crowd reacted instantly. Cheers, gasps, chants, 50,000 voices forming a tidal wave that pressed on the gladiator's mind. Some sought blood, others admired skill. Some were cruel, others sympathetic. The emperor watched, thumb poised, deciding the fate of men with a single gesture. Death was imminent. Glory was possible. The young gladiator's heart pounded in rhythm with the blows exchanged. Sweat, blood, and dust mixed in the air. His muscles burned, yet every strike was guided by the lessons learned over countless mornings, countless bruises, countless fears confronted and overcome. He remembered Flamma, Spiculus, Spartacus, names that became shields against panic, talismans of courage. Pain sharpened his senses. The sound of sand shifting under the opponent's feet, the flash of sunlight on a blade, the subtle exhale before an attack, all became signals. The crowd ceased to exist as a mass. It became a single entity, a force to be respected but not feared. The arena was alive, yes, but it responded to skill, not terror. As the fight progressed, a rhythm emerged: attack, parry, evade, strike. The young gladiator moved like water, flowing around the opponent, striking where the armor was weakest, retreating where danger was greatest. His mind sharpened, instinct merging with intellect. Each movement became poetry, each strike a stanza, each parry a line in the story of his survival. And then, the critical moment. The opponent faltered, a minor misstep, a breath too slow. Instinct took over. The young gladiator struck, sword connecting with precision. The crowd erupted, cheers mingled with gasps. The first victory, the first acknowledgement of skill, the first taste of glory. Yet there was no time to savor. The arena demanded more. More courage, more blood, more legend. In the Colosseum, every victory was fleeting. Every breath could be the last. Every eye watched, every gesture analyzed. Success was measured in survival, in spectacle, in the ability to endure the unbearable. The young gladiator felt a transformation. Fear had not disappeared, but it had become a tool. Pain was no longer just a threat, it was a teacher. He was no longer merely a boy from a distant province or a condemned criminal. He was a gladiator. The arena had shaped him, and now he shaped it in return. The fight continued, brutal and unrelenting. The sand drank blood, the sun bore witness, and the crowd fed on the tension. Each swing of the sword was a question posed to fate. Each dodge, a statement of defiance. And all the while, the emperor's eyes remained upon him, deciding which life would be honored and which discarded. The first match ended with the young gladiator standing, chest heaving, sword in hand, adrenaline coursing through every vein. The opponent lay humbled, perhaps injured, perhaps broken. The crowd roared approval. The emperor nodded slightly, granting mercy where death could have been swift. The gladiator had survived, the first lesson of the arena mastered. But survival was not the end. It was merely the beginning. The Colosseum was a world of infinite tests, of endless trials. Each fight honed skill, courage, and cunning. Each victory or defeat carved the man further, shaping him into something greater than flesh alone. In this arena, every warrior became a story, every battle a verse, and every drop of blood a testament to the relentless pursuit of glory. Even as he left the sand, blooded and bruised, the young gladiator understood the truth. The arena was not just a place to fight. It was a crucible, forging not only the body but the soul. It demanded everything: courage, strategy, endurance, and rewarded only those who understood the dance between life and death. The Colosseum, vast and eternal, remained silent once the crowd departed. But its stones remembered. Every cheer, every gasp, every heartbeat of fear or courage was etched into its memory. And those who walked its sand, who faced death and returned, carried that memory with them forever. Because the arena did not merely kill or entertain. It revealed the essence of men. It separated the ordinary from the extraordinary. And it immortalized those who could face death, not with resignation, but with defiance, skill, and a heart willing to bleed for glory. In the silence after the battle, the young gladiator knelt in the sand, breathing deeply, feeling the pulse of the Colosseum beneath him. He had faced death. He had survived. He had been seen. And in that moment, he understood what all those who came before had known. The arena was not merely a place of death. It was a place where men became legends, where courage met destiny, and where life, however fleeting, was made eternal. The arena awaited more, and he would return. The Colosseum trembled with anticipation. The sun rose higher, burning the sand, casting long shadows of anticipation across the arena. Today was not just another fight. Today was a spectacle of legend, a test of endurance, courage, and destiny. Men would clash not only for survival, but for glory. And in that glory, they would carve their names into the eternal memory of Rome. Some gladiators had fought hundreds of battles, their bodies mapped with scars, their eyes sharpened by death itself. Others were newcomers, trembling beneath the gaze of thousands, tasting fear for the first time in its purest form. But in the arena, all were equal before the sand, before the crowd, before the gods. The crowd roared, 50,000 strong, a living organism of appetite and emotion. Senators, merchants, slaves, and citizens, all united in a singular obsession, to witness men dance on the knife's edge between life and death. Every cheer, every gasp, every frantic chant shaped the air itself, bending it into a force the gladiators could feel in their bones. And then the gates opened. The first combatants entered, armored, weaponed, and fearless in appearance, though every heartbeat betrayed their humanity. Steel clashed with steel, muscles tensed, and blood began to stain the sand almost immediately. This was more than a fight. It was a ritual, a story unfolding with each strike, each parry, each evasive step. Among them, one figure stood apart, a gladiator whose fame had spread across Rome. Perhaps he was a slave who had defied fate, or a volunteer who had sold his freedom for glory. He moved with the fluidity of experience, anticipating strikes, exploiting weaknesses, and turning every attack into a statement. The crowd recognized skill, and their roar escalated into a deafening wave of approval. But the games were not merely about individual valor. They were intertwined with politics, power, and symbolism. The emperor, seated above in the marble edifice, watched with a calculating gaze. His decisions were law, his gestures could grant mercy or summon death. The arena was his instrument of control. Each fight served as a lesson, not only to the gladiators, but to all of Rome. Death was a spectacle, yes, but it was also a message. The fight escalated. Opponents fell, others rose. The sand drank more blood, and yet the warriors pressed on, each step a defiance of mortality. The young gladiator remembered the training of the Ludus Magnus, the lessons of endurance, cunning, and resilience. He had survived before, but now he realized survival alone was not enough. To endure here was to become legend. And legend was fleeting. Even the greatest gladiators could fall. Spiculus, who had once dazzled Nero himself, could not escape the whims of fortune. Flamma, who had rejected freedom 4 times, could not evade fate forever. Spartacus, whose rebellion had shaken the empire, had met a bloody end, yet in his death, he became immortal. The arena mirrored life. Glory came with a price, and the fall was inevitable. The crowd witnessed it all, triumphs and defeats, courage and despair, skill and mortality intertwined like the threads of a tapestry. Every battle was a story, every strike a word, every life a verse written in sand and blood. Sometimes, the fall was literal. A slip, a miscalculation, a sudden strike, and the man who had seemed invincible was gone. Yet even in death, a gladiator could leave a mark. The crowd remembered not just the fight, but the courage it took to stand, to strike, to face inevitable doom with unwavering resolve. And then there were the moments of mercy, rare, fleeting, and profound. The emperor's thumb, a gesture of life or death, could save a man who had earned it through skill, honor, or sheer audacity. Freedom could be granted, but only to those whose names would echo long after the sand had absorbed their blood. The rudis, the wooden sword of release, symbolized not just survival, but the recognition of greatness. Few received it, but those who did became legends while still living. As the sun began to set, casting long crimson shadows across the arena, the fight slowed. Survivors, exhausted and battered, knelt in the sand, acknowledging the invisible hand that had spared them. The Colosseum had tested them, shaped them, and witnessed their defiance. Outside, Rome continued. Life went on. But inside the arena, a profound truth was clear. Glory was transient, mortality inevitable, yet courage, skill, and the stories born of blood endured forever. The gladiators' deeds were etched not just in memory, but in the very soul of the empire. When the gates finally closed and the crowd dispersed, the arena was silent once more. The sand, soaked with sacrifice, reflected the fading light. The warriors had left, some alive, some dead, all changed. The Colosseum held their echoes, their struggles, their fleeting triumphs. Death was always near. Glory was always fleeting. Yet the men who faced the arena understood something timeless. To live as a gladiator was to defy the ordinary, to embrace the impossible, and to transform fear into immortality. For those who had walked its sand, fought its battles, and survived its wrath, life was never the same. They were no longer simply men. They were symbols of courage, of defiance, of the eternal struggle between mortality and legend. The Colosseum would stand long after empires fell, long after Rome itself crumbled to dust. But the story of its gladiators would endure, in whispers, in tales, in hearts that still dreamed of glory, honor, and the courage to face death unflinchingly. Because death had once been entertainment. But those who entertained death became immortal. And in the end, that was the true victory. The Colosseum stands silent now, but it is far from empty. Its stones echo the footsteps of men who fought, bled, and sometimes died, transforming themselves into legends. Time has passed, empires have fallen, and yet the legacy of the gladiators endures, woven into the fabric of human imagination. What were they? Slaves, criminals, volunteers seeking glory, all, in their own way, mirrors of the human condition. They were ordinary men thrust into extraordinary circumstances, forced to confront fear, pain, and death. And in doing so, they revealed a truth that transcends history. Courage is timeless, and the desire to be remembered is universal. Modern arenas are far removed from the Colosseum. Stadiums of steel and glass replace sand and stone. Screens replace the eyes of 50,000 spectators. Yet the fascination with heroism, combat, and spectacle remains. Athletes, soldiers, performers, we are drawn to those who test the limits of the human body and spirit, who risk everything for the thrill of survival or the promise of glory. In every sport, every competition, every challenge, we see echoes of the gladiator struggle. Films and literature have preserved them, romanticized them, and transformed them into symbols. Spartacus, Maximus, Flamma, Spiculus, names that resonate not for their deaths, but for their defiance, skill, and courage. Their stories remind us that even in the face of certain mortality, one can act with honor, precision, and heroism. They are a reflection of what we admire, what we aspire to, and what we fear, the confrontation with our own impermanence. But the legacy is not only in fiction. It is in the rituals, the discipline, the endurance that define modern human endeavor. Every soldier who marches into battle, every athlete who pushes past exhaustion, every individual who faces fear and emerges stronger, they inherit the lessons of the arena. Discipline, strategy, courage, and resilience were not just survival tools. They were the building blocks of legend. The gladiators' lives were brutal, brief, and uncertain. Yet in that brevity, they achieved a kind of immortality. Their names, their deeds, their courage, preserved in history, in memory, in the human psyche. They remind us that greatness is often forged in adversity, that honor can exist in the shadow of despair, and that the human spirit is capable of extraordinary resilience. The Colosseum itself, scarred by time, is a monument not just to Rome, but to humanity's fascination with the balance of life and death. Its arches and walls speak of triumph and tragedy, of spectacle and sacrifice. Visitors today feel the weight of its history, the energy of the crowd, the tension of the battles, the courage of the men who once walked its sands. The stones remember every cheer, every gasp, every heartbeat that once filled the air. Even as centuries pass, the lessons remain clear. Courage is not the absence of fear, but mastery of it. Glory is not given, but earned through struggle and defiance. Mortality is inevitable, yet the impact of a single life, lived fully and fiercely, can echo across millennia. The gladiators understood this. In sweat, blood, and sand, they wrote their names into eternity. And so we remember them. Not only for their deaths, but for their lives, lived on the knife's edge, fully aware that every moment could be the last. We remember them because they embody a truth we all confront. Life is fleeting, death is certain. And yet, in courage and honor, we can achieve a kind of immortality that no passage of time can erase. The arena is gone. The games have ended. But the spirit of the gladiator endures. In our stories, our rituals, our aspirations, we carry the blood, sand, and glory of those who faced death unflinchingly. They remind us that in the face of fear, we can rise. In the shadow of mortality, we can shine. And in the fleeting moment of existence, we can leave behind a legacy that time itself cannot destroy. Death was entertainment once, but those who entertained death, they became eternal. And that is the story of the gladiators, not merely of blood and sand, but of courage, resilience, and the unyielding human desire to be remembered. Their legacy is ours, and it will endure as long as there are those willing to face fear, defy fate, and stand, sword in hand, on the sands of life itself.